Hey, welcome back to another chapter breakdown of the My Hero Academia manga. Today we're going to be diving into chapter 294, which is where things are starting to finally wind down for this battle that's been going on for 10, 15 chapters now. And it's probably a really good thing for both sides. Neither side is looking very good, and we do get a very cool face reveal here, but let's not talk too much about the overall chapter. Let's talk about what actually happened here. So chapter 294 starts with Aizawa, Hawks, Mirko, pretty much everyone that's gone plus Ultra throughout this entire fight, pretty much unconscious, knocked out, pretty much on death's door, and pretty much done for good. Meanwhile, Best Jeanist is still doing his best to hold down Machia, who is now fallen over now that the sedative has finally kicked in thanks to everyone's help up to this point. Elsewhere, Mirio, Bako, Eri, and Hado are all continuing to fight the Nomu, and there is a mention by Mirio that all of these Nomu probably have the same amount of strength as High End that appeared in the Hawks versus Endeavor fight a couple months back now at this point. Ida is telling Bakugo by his full name of Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite. Ida, even though saying he did not like the name in the last chapter, is still respecting Bakugo enough to call him by the full name in the heat of battle, which just shows a lot about Ida's character, but overall, I just love the moment. But pretty much he's saying that Bakugo needs to stop fighting as he is in no shape to continue fighting. And Bakugo wants to fight back, but he's not even able to talk, so he kind of admits that Ida probably has a point here. So we do go back to Best Jeanist, who is holding down Machia still, and uses all of his energy now to switch focus over to the League of Villain. Pretty much, I don't know if he's trying to squeeze him to death, just capture him. I don't know what he does, but he's squeezing Shigaraki, Compress, and Spinner until they pass out, give up, whatever it may be. And we also start seeing them monologuing, talking amongst each other, mainly Mr. Compress. And we do get one glance of Toga still running away from the confrontation with Froppy and Uraraka, just crying, it looks like almost still. But Spinner, who is starting to pretty much give up on it, senses how he talks about how much he loves about the League of Villains and how he's pretty much going to miss it. But Mr. Compress pretty much loses part of his body in order to break free and then uses his quirk on Shigaraki and Spinner, saying that I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to wake up Shigaraki so that you can get out of here. And he goes into a long monologue stating how he is the descendant of Hamaria Uji, who was an elite criminal, a Robin Hood-like character that would take from these undeserving heroes and give back to the community and the poor around it. A little bit more about him in the after comments. But right as that happens, we do shift back over to Toya and Shoto, who are continuing on their every weekly episode of keeping up with the Todorokis. And Toya pretty much says, hey, this isn't even worth it anymore. Endeavor's knocked out, so he's not going to get to experience me killing you, so I'm going to leave. And he pretty much just does. He goes over to Mr. Compress after shooting off a big blast in a Todoroki, looking like knocking him unconscious. And it says, like, okay, we're done here. So, towards the end of the chapter, Mr. Compress does do a face reveal, and of course he's hot. I've never seen a community so excited about knowing someone being this hot as Twitter was this morning when everyone saw the face reveal. Everyone freaked out, so I did enjoy that, and he is admittedly good looking, but pretty much announced that this is his first and final escape, meaning that he's probably not going to sustain the injuries that he took in that. Even Best Jeanist mentioning that he's pretty much not going to make it through that. But that is where this chapter ends, seemingly with the fight almost concluding. I mean, obviously there's a couple of things left over here of how they're actually going to escape, or if they're just going to wake up Shigaraki to try and fight. We don't know exactly what's going to happen here, but the chapter seems where it's starting to wind down. Most, if not all, the heroes are either incredibly occupied by the Nomu or knocked out, and the villains are in just as rough a shape with Machia down. They really don't have much of an advantage here, and Shigaraki being in the similar state to where Deku is of not really being able to do much means that there's not much for either side to do right now except for break away, recover, and then probably go back at this in a couple of months. Big question that a lot of people are going to have from this chapter is going to be, who is this descendant of Mr. Compress? Who is Harima Oji? We've only had one mention of him. He showed up in the anime once, and he showed up in a couple of chapters here, and that was all from the mentions of Gentle when talking about great historical villains back there. And he compared this Harima Oji to the likes of Destro and All For One of being on the same level of villainous. We don't know if his ability was actually that much in terms of killing strength, or if that's just how big of a villain he was from popularity and knowing. It's not too clear about that, and we don't even learn too much about his actual quirk, just that I am a great descendant of him. This is my first and final escape as his descendant, and that's about all we know about the character. I'd love to give you more information, but he was a Robin Hood-like villain that's been mentioned once or twice. We may learn more about him, because obviously this felt like a very big reveal. Like, I am the descendant of this great villain. And it didn't feel that great except for the fact that, okay, he was able to break out. Binding escape is what Mr. Caprest used to get out of that. And it didn't... Maybe it was supposed to be a bigger moment, or maybe it's going to be flushed into a bigger moment. But right now, it was just a really cool setup for his face reveal that so many people have been wanting for a very long time. But beyond that, I feel like the relative part of the reveal wasn't as much, unless it's going to play into something bigger, maybe going on to Mr. Caprest's power, if he is even able to make it through the injuries that he sustained during this fight. But outside of that, there's not too much to really break down in this chapter. I mean, the Endeavor, Toya, and Shoto fight didn't really go anywhere. Definitely thinking that there's probably going to be one of them dying or being much more injured than it is. I mean, Endeavor's not in a good state here. He is passed out at this point. But definitely thinking that there is going to be some conclusion to one of those arcs. But it really feels like it's almost just going to be a full wipe clean, that not too many major deaths on either side. A lot of people are injured from the hero side. Maybe one or two of them are going to not make it through or be permanently injured and not be able to participate in future fights. But for so much that happened here, it didn't feel like there was a lot of death or really conclusions of really any moments here. I mean, the whole Hawks trader arc has definitely come to an end here, but the Todoroki arc is still going to continue on. That family issues are going to continue on. Deku and Shigaraki had a brief showdown, but that didn't even continue on, and knowing that he's only at a portion of his power, meaning that maybe he could regenerate and go up to that 100%, and that's when we get the final fight. But there's still so much left in the air that this giant fight kind of flushed it out, but I think it's going to be more focused on the future of what is going to happen with the Hero Society as a whole. No matter what Mr. Best Jeanist coming back means for heroes, there's still going to be a shaking of how much society trusts heroes. They barely were able to hold this together. Obviously, multiple of the top 10 heroes are incredibly injured, and who knows when they'll be back to action. And that's not going to be good, and it's showing of how big this villain mass was, even though a lot of them have been taken care of during this giant battle, that this still could happen again, and it still wasn't taken care of by an army of heroes to take down the smaller batch of villains. So I think that's going to be really interesting, and I think this next arc, whenever this does finally wrap up here, is going to be really world building and setting up the stage for a possible collapse of Hero Society, or a call for a changing of how the Hero Society is right now in reaction to this. Very similar almost to like a Civil War type thing from the Marvel universe. Of there was so much death and destruction that these heroes didn't seem like they were doing the right thing sometimes, that the people called for a change. And I could definitely see that happening here with the outcome of this fight not being as hero dominant as society would want or expect. But I don't have too much else to add for these chapters. It was another phenomenal chapter. I'm really curious to see where it goes. If you guys enjoyed my breakdown here, just kind of talking about the chapter for 8-9 minutes here, please do subscribe down below, leave your thoughts, like the video, all that stuff. You know how it works. And also, we do a weekly My Hero Academia podcast on all major podcasting platforms called the Class 1A Podcast. Just find that on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever you listen to. We talk about the My Hero Academia Vigilantes manga. We'll be doing weekly recaps of the show, very similar to this when the anime comes out in the spring. Otherwise, we do special topics such as who is the trader of UA, ranking the openers and closings, and all kind of fun stuff like that. But that'll be all for this week's video. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you guys next week for another phenomenal chapter.